Welcome back to Drowsy History, the channel where the past becomes a place to rest. Tonight, we're sailing north to a green fjord in Norway, more than 1100 years ago, to a longhouse with smoke curling from its roof. Tonight, you are a Viking raider's wife, and almost everything you think you know about her is about to gently come apart. Before we begin, if these quiet journeys into history help you drift off, consider subscribing so you never lose your way back here. And leave a comment with the oldest story your family still tells and where in the world it took place. Some of you have sailors and farmers and stubborn survivors in your family trees, and those stories deserve to be written down somewhere before they fade. I read everyone, usually with a cup of tea, and they are some of my favorite things on the internet. Now, dim the lights, pull your blankets up like a wool cloak against a sea wind. Let my voice become the crackle of a long fire burning down the center of a great hall. Somewhere out on the water, ships are coming and going, but you are home. And home, as you're about to learn, is where the real power lives. Close your eyes and picture the year 875. You are standing on a strip of green land between two enormous things: a mountain at your back, rising into cloud, and a fjord at your feet, so deep and so still that it holds a perfect upside-down copy of the world. The water is the color of iron. The air smells of salt, wet grass, birch smoke, and animals. This is Western Norway, and this narrow shelf of soil is your entire world, and in a way you'll come to understand, your kingdom. You were born a few valleys away, on a farm very much like this one. You have never seen a city. You have never seen a map. But you are not ignorant of the world. Far from it. Your husband has stood in the markets of Dublin. Your neighbor's son has seen the walls of a Frankish town on the River Seine. There is a silver coin in your family's chest that was struck in Baghdad, a city so far away that no one you know can quite explain where it is, only that the roads to it are made of rivers. The world comes to you in fragments, carried home in the bellies of ships. The farm around you is called by your family's name, and it will be called that for 1,000 years after you're gone. That's how deeply names sink into this landscape. There's the longhouse, low and long, its turf roof so green that from the mountainside it looks like a fold in the hill itself. There are the byres for the cattle, the small outbuildings for storage, a smithy that smells of charcoal, and down by the water, a nost, a boathouse, standing empty at the moment, because the ship it shelters is somewhere west of here, across the sea. That ship is the thing outsiders will remember about your people: the raids, the dragon heads, the monks writing in the margins of their books, asking God to deliver them from the fury of the Northmen. For a long time, that will be the whole story anyone tells: the men, the ships, the axes. But here is the first quiet truth of tonight, and it may be the biggest one. The raiding was seasonal. The farm was forever. For every week your husband spends with a sword in his hand, he spends months with a scythe, a fishing line, a hammer. And for every hour of his life, in every season, this farm has to run: the cattle fed, the cloth woven, the food stored against a winter that is always, always coming. Someone has to command that. Someone does. Her name is not written in any chronicle. No frightened monk ever prayed to be delivered from her. but she carries the keys to everything, and when the ship sails out of the fjord each spring, she becomes, in every way that matters, the ruler of this little kingdom by the water. She is you, and tonight you're going to live her whole life, the work and the waiting, the laws that will genuinely surprise you, the gods in your doorway, the sorrows handled gently, and the strange, stubborn power of a woman standing in a doorway with iron keys at her belt. So take a breath of that cold, clean air. The mountain holds its place. The tide breathes in the fjord. Let's begin where your story as a wife began, with a marriage that was less about love than you'd hope, and more about power than you'd ever guess. You were about 16 when the men came to talk about you. That's how it happened. Not a proposal on one knee, but a negotiation between two families, conducted over ale in your father's hall while you worked at the far end of the room and listened to every single word while pretending not to. Marriage in your world is an alliance. It binds two farms, two kindreds, two webs of cousins and obligations into one larger web. When feuds break out, and they do, the question of who stands with whom can be decided by marriages made a generation earlier. So when your father and your future husband's father sat down together, they were not really discussing romance. They were discussing land, cattle, silver, and loyalty. But here is the first surprise, and it's a real one. You were not sold, quite the opposite. The groom's family paid a bride price, the munder, to seal the match, a payment without which the marriage wasn't even legal. Your own family sent you off with a dowry, the hymen filgia, your share of your father's wealth, paid out early. And on the morning after the wedding, your new husband gave you the morning gift, silver, animals, sometimes land. That was yours. Now hold on to that word, yours. The dowry and the morning gift did not vanish into your husband's pockets. They remained, in the eyes of the law and everyone you know, your property, held in trust within the marriage. If the marriage ever ended, and we'll get to the astonishing ways it could end, that wealth walked out the door with you. A wife in your world is not a possession. She arrives as a wealthy stranger with a legal claim, and everyone in the hall knows it. Could you refuse the match? Honestly, it depended. The law in some places said a woman's consent should be sought, and the sagas your grandchildren will hear are absolutely full of cautionary tales about what happens when it isn't. When a daughter is married off against her will, the storytellers make sure the marriage ends in disaster, embarrassment, or a very pointed divorce. That tells you what people believed. Forcing a bride was legal in places, but it was known to be foolish, and stories were the way your culture wagged its finger. Your wedding itself took place at your family's farm in autumn, when the brewing was done and there was ale enough for a feast lasting days. There were witnesses, always witnesses, because in a world without paperwork, memory is the legal record. Guests watched you and your husband share the bridal ale. They watched a hammer, sign of the god Thor, laid in your lap to bless the union. They watched you led to the bed, in torchlight, by a procession of witnesses, not to embarrass you, but because a marriage everyone has seen is a marriage no one can later deny. And somewhere in the ceremony came the moment that mattered most, the one this whole night will keep circling back to. You were handed the keys of your new household. From that day, you were the husfreyja, the lady of the house, the Freya, the same word your people use for a goddess. Girls dream about the wedding. Wise women, you will learn, think rather harder about the keys. Let's look at those keys properly, because in the whole of your world, there is no clearer badge of office. They hang from a brooch or a belt at your waist, iron or bronze, long shafted, beautifully made, and they clink softly when you walk, so that everyone in the longhouse hears authority coming before they see it. Archaeologists, more than 1,000 years from now, will keep finding keys in the graves of women, laid on the body with the same care other graves give to swords. When your people bury a woman with her keys, they are writing her resume in iron. This was a ruler of a household. This woman was in charge. In charge of what exactly? Your world draws an invisible line across every farm, and the law itself speaks of it. It runs along the threshold of the longhouse. Everything in and stocks, within the doorposts, belongs to you. Everything beyond them, the fields and the boats and the dealings with other farms, belongs in principle to your husband. Outsiders will hear that and think, so she was confined to the house. But that is exactly backwards, and here's why. Within the doorposts doesn't mean cooking and tidying. It means the food stores that decide whether everyone on this farm lives through the winter. It means the dairy, the brewing, the cloth production that functions as this economy's actual currency. It means directing every servant and worker in the household. On a Viking Age farm, the indoors is not the small half of life. It is the treasury, the granary, the factory, and the bank, and you hold the only keys. Think about what a locked chest means in a world without police, without banks, without safes. Everything of value your family owns, the silver arm rings, the imported beads, the seed grain, the honey, the smoked meat that must last until spring, lives in chests and storehouses. Whoever holds the keys holds the family's survival in her hand every single day. Your husband can win silver across the sea, but the moment it comes home, it passes into a chest that you lock. And the keys carry a meaning even beyond that. In the law codes your descendants will write down, a wife is described as coming under lock and key with marriage, not locked up, but invested with lock and key, the way a king is invested with a crown. There are even stories of what it means to take a woman's keys from her. It is the gravest insult, the symbolic firing of a household's commander, and it is the kind of act that starts saga-worthy trouble. So when you walk the length of your longhouse in the evening, hearing that soft iron music at your hip, understand what everyone around the fire understands. The sword that's carried out of this house, each spring gets the poetry. The keys that never leave it get the power. Come inside now, out of the wind, and let the door thump shut behind you. It takes your eyes a long moment to adjust, because the longhouse has no windows to speak of, just the doorway, a smoke hole in the roof, and the fire. The fire is everything. It runs down the center of the great room in a long, stone-lined hearth, and it has not fully gone out in years. Guarding it, banking it at night, coaxing it back each morning, that too is your responsibility, and in a land this cold, it is close to a sacred one. The house itself is maybe 100 feet long, its walls made of timber and turf so thick that the worst storms outside become nothing but a distant rumor. The roof is grass. In summer, it blooms. Inside, the air is warm, dim, golden, and thick. Wood smoke, wet wool, animals, dried fish, tar, and underneath it all, the green smell of the turf itself. Travelers from the south find it overwhelming. To you, it is simply the smell of being home and being safe. Along both long walls run broad earthen benches, topped with wood and heaped with furs and woolen blankets. This is where everyone sits, works, eats, and sleeps. Family at the honored end near the high seat, servants and workers further down. Privacy, as later centuries will understand it, does not exist here, and no one misses what they've never had. In the darkest months, the cattle themselves live under this same roof, in a byre at the far end, and their warmth is part of what keeps the house alive. You fall asleep each night to a soft chorus, the fire settling, the wind in the smoke hole, someone snoring, and the slow breathing of cows. Your corner of this world is marked by your loom, standing tall against a wall where the light from the doorway can reach it, and by your locked chests beneath the benches. There is very little furniture otherwise, a few stools, an iron cauldron hanging over the fire on a chain, soapstone pots, wooden trenchers, and if your family is doing well, a set of imported glass beads hanging at your throat to prove it. And notice something about this room, something outsiders always get wrong. This is not a warrior's barracks decorated with skulls and menace. It's a workshop, a nursery, a warehouse, and a parliament, all in one dim golden hall. The center of the Viking world is not the prow of a dragon ship. It's this fire, and the person who keeps this fire is you. Morning comes early, and it comes to you first. You wake before the household does, in the gray hush when the fire is down to its coals, and you begin the quiet work of bringing the day to life, feeding the flames, setting water to heat, waking the milkmaids, unbarring the door to let the dogs out into the dew. Understand this above all, the Vikings are farmers, nearly all of them, nearly all the time. The raids that terrify distant kingdoms are a seasonal sideline conducted by a minority. The cattle are eternal. Your farm keeps cows, sheep, goats, pigs, geese, and a few shaggy horses. It grows barley and oats in small walled fields, cabbage and onions and beans in a garden near the house, and it harvests the fjord itself, cod and herring, seals, seabird eggs gathered from the cliffs, and mussels from the tide line. Your mornings belong to the dairy, and the dairy belongs entirely to women. Milking, churning butter, straining curds, setting cheese, culturing the thick soured milk called skyr that your household eats nearly every day. None of this is casual kitchen work. Butter and cheese are how summer is stored so it can be eaten in February. Get the dairy wrong, and the winter arithmetic of your farm stops adding up. In some parts of your world, butter is so central that rents and debts can be paid in it, which means the product of your hands is, quite literally, money. Through the day, the farm hums around you and you conduct it. Servants carry water and firewood. Children shoo birds from the barley. Someone is always mending a fence, a net, a shoe, a wall. In summer, the young people drive the cattle up to the sheilings, the high mountain pastures, and live up there for weeks making butter and cheese in the long, pale nights, while down below, you manage the haymaking that will keep those same animals alive through the dark months. Because that is the true engine of your year, not the raiding season, but the hay. Every animal that cannot be fed through an 8-month winter must be slaughtered in autumn. So the size of your herd, the wealth of your family, is decided by grass, cut and dried and stored under your direction. When you walk past your full hay barn in October, you feel what a jarl feels looking at his silver. And at day's end, when the light goes copper on the fjord and the cattle come lowing down to the byre, you stand in the doorway, exactly on that legal threshold of yours, and count them home. Then the door is barred, the fire is built up, and the other half of your workday begins. Because the farm feeds the household, but it's the loom, waiting there in the shadows, that clothes it, sails it, and makes it rich. If tonight's journey leaves you with one picture, let it be this one: a woman standing at a tall wooden loom in the half light, weights of stone or clay swinging gently at the bottom of the threads, her hands moving in a rhythm older than any kingdom. Because here is a truth that almost no one remembers about the Viking Age. It was powered by cloth, and every thread of that cloth was made by women. Start with the numbers, because they are staggering. Before anything can be woven, wool must be spun into thread by hand with a drop spindle, a weighted stick spinning at your hip while you walk, talk, mind children, stir pots. Women in your world spin the way people in other ages breathe, constantly, automatically, everywhere. It takes something like 10 hours of spinning to produce the thread for 1 hour of weaving. A single, simple garment represents days of invisible work. Your family wears your labor on its back every day, all of it. Now scale that up and prepare to be amazed. A Viking ship, the sleek, famous, world changing dragon ship, is driven by a great square woolen sail. That sail can take one skilled woman years of combined spinning and weaving to produce. The wool for a big one is the annual fleece of a couple hundred sheep. Scholars of a later age will run the arithmetic and come to a conclusion your neighbors would find obvious. Producing the sails of the Viking fleets consumed as much skilled labor as building the hulls, and very possibly more. Sit with that for a moment, because it quietly rewrites the whole story. Every raid that ever left this coast, every voyage to Iceland, every trading run down the rivers to the east, all of it moved on cloth that women spent years making. When the wind fills a sail off the coast of Ireland, what's actually catching that wind is the patient work of mothers, daughters, and grandmothers standing at looms beside their fires. No sailcloth, no Viking Age. The ships get the sagas. The sails should have gotten them. And beyond the sails, your weaving is money in the most literal sense. Standardized lengths of plain wool cloth, wadmal, function as legal currency across the northern world. Debts are priced in it. Fines are paid in it. When your descendants in Iceland write down their laws, they'll price things in cloth as naturally as in silver, which means the loom against your wall is not a domestic corner, it's a mint. So on winter evenings, when the outdoor world has shrunk to darkness and the whole household gathers inside, the hall fills with textile work like a tide, carding, spinning, weaving, dyeing wool with lichen and leaves, sewing, embroidering for those with rank to show. There is talk and storytelling over it, and there is also, always, the quiet click of the loom weights, the sound, if anyone were listening properly, of a civilization being held together. Somewhere in the middle of all this, everyone must be fed, twice a day, morning and evening, every day, forever. the day meal after the morning's first work, the night meal when the light fails. Feeding a longhouse full of family, workers, and guests is a logistics operation, and you are its quartermaster. The daily fare is humbler than the feasting scenes in stories: barley porridge, coarse flatbread baked on a griddle over the coals, boiled fish, cheese, skyr, butter, whatever the garden gives, and ale, always ale, brewed by you, because water is untrustworthy, and thin ale is what everyone, children included, actually drinks. Meat is for good days and cold months. Honey is treasure. Salt is precious enough that households boil seawater or burn seaweed to win it, because without salt, almost nothing keeps. And keeping things is the real game. You live at a latitude where the growing season is a brief green sprint and the winter is an 8-month siege, so nearly everything you handle in summer and autumn is aimed at February. Fish are dried on racks in the wind until they're hard as boards. Meat is smoked in the rafters or salted in barrels. Butter is packed away. Some of it, heavily salted or fermented, will still be good years from now. Sour whey preserves what salt can't be spared for. Grain sleeps in your locked storehouses. When the autumn slaughter comes and the household works for days turning animals into stores, it is your judgment that decides how much of everything there must be. Run that arithmetic wrong, and people you love go hungry in March, the month your descendants will remember in stories as the cruelest stretch of the year when winter is old but spring hasn't come. Run it right year after year, and your farm has the thing your world respects almost above courage: plenty. A famous household is a feeding household, which brings us to feasts, because hospitality here isn't a nicety. It's law and religion braided together. A traveler must be housed and fed. The god Odin himself, the poems warn, walks the roads disguised as a shabby stranger, testing exactly this. And the great seasonal feasts, harvest, midwinter, the departure ales and homecoming ales, are where reputations are minted. Your husband may host them, but everyone present knows whose stores, whose brewing, and whose command made the table groan. When the ale horns go around a crowded hall and the guests grow loud and happy, the honor settles on the house, and the house, within its doorposts, is you. Before the ships leave, let's dress you properly, because in your world, clothing is a language, and you happen to be one of its most fluent speakers. Nothing you wear is accidental. Every layer is a sentence about who you are, what your household commands, and how seriously the world had better take you. The foundation is a long shift of linen if your family can afford flax, wool if not, ankle length and fine against the skin. Over it goes the garment that will practically define Viking women for archaeologists. The hangarock, a woolen apron dress, its shoulder straps fastened be a pair of large domed brooches, tortoise brooches, later ages will call them, gilded bronze, worn like twin badges of rank at your collarbones. Between them hang your festoons, strings of beads, glass from the Rhineland, amber from the Baltic, perhaps a single carnelian that traveled farther than any person you know, and hanging from the brooches on little chains, the toolkit of your office, shears, a needle case, a knife, sometimes those tiny scales, and of course, on the honored side, the keys. A well-dressed husfreyja jingles faintly, and everyone knows the music. Color is wealth made visible. Anyone can wear the sheep's own browns and grays. Dyed cloth costs labor and knowledge. Both of them yours? You and your women coax reds from madder, blues from woad, yellows from weld and birch leaves, and the deep walnut browns that flatter everyone. A gown of strong, even color announces a household with dye vats, skill, and wool to spare. Trim it with tablet woven bands, intricate patterned ribbons that take a specialist's patience. Or, if the ships have been lucky, with a shocking inch of Byzantine silk at the cuffs, and you are speaking loudly without saying a word. Your husband's finery, mind you, is also your handiwork and also your billboard. When he walks to the assembly in a cloak whose weave other women stop to examine, pinned with silver at the shoulder, he is wearing your reputation. The sagas understand this perfectly. Garments in the stories are constantly noticed, praised, envied. A fine shirt is a plot point, and as you'll recall from our divorce chapter, occasionally a legal one. And one more layer, the finest of all, silver itself. In a world where your family's wealth must be kept close, jewelry is the bank you wear. Twisted silver neck rings, arm rings that double as ready money, a hoard's worth of metal distributed across the household's bodies for safekeeping and for show. When you enter a feast hall dressed in full state, the color, the beads, the paired brooches flashing, silver at your wrists, and keys at your belt, you are not decorated. You are itemized. You are the household's balance sheet, walking in beauty, and every woman present can read you to the last ounce. You'd have it no other way. You dress them all yourself. It comes every year, and every year it feels the same. Spring. The ice loosens its grip on the fjord, the sewing gets done, and then one morning you wake to a particular quality of bustle down by the Nost, and you know, the ship is going out. Why does he go? You know the honest answers, and they are more ordinary than the legends will be. Silver first. Your world runs on it, and the lands across the water are rich, poorly defended in the wrong places, and reachable. Land for the younger men who will never inherit a farm at home in these narrow valleys. Reputation, which in your culture is a currency more durable than silver. A man's name and his deeds are the only part of him that everyone agrees will last. And underneath it all, that restless arithmetic of a country with more suns than soil. Some years it isn't raining at all, and this is worth saying plainly. The same ship, the same men, the same summer can be spent trading, down the coast to the markets, south to the great trading towns, east along the rivers. The line between merchant and raider in your world is famously thin. It can depend on nothing more than how well defended a harbor looks. You do not ask many questions about which side of the line a given summer fell on. Most wives don't. The preparation, though, that's yours. For weeks before departure, your household becomes a supply depot. Sea chests are packed. Dried fish and hard bread and butter are counted out by your hand from your stores. Every garment on every man's back, every cloak he'll sleep under on a beach in the Hebrides, every stitch of the sail above him, made by you and the women of this house. An army, someone will say in a much later century, marches on its stomach. A Viking fleet sails on its wives. Then the morning itself. The whole household walks down to the water. There are gifts and words, and there is a departure ale drunk on the shore. You are not expected to weep. Composure is a kind of armor your culture prizes in its women, and so you stand straight, with the keys at your belt and the youngest child on your hip, and you watch the ship come alive, the oars biting, the striped sail climbing the mast and cracking full of wind, the hull leaning into the fjord like an animal let off its leash. It is, and you'd admit this only quietly, a beautiful sight. It is also the sight of your entire summer changing shape, because as the sail shrinks toward the sea, every soul left on that shore turns and looks, without quite meaning to, at you. Here is the plain arithmetic of your marriage. Your husband may be gone from the sowing to the frost, a quarter of the year, sometimes half of it. Some men are gone for years, wintering overseas. Some, as we'll gently discuss later, don't come back at all, which means that for great stretches of your married life, the largest farm in this valley, its lands, its herds, its workers, its disputes, its dignity, answers to exactly one person, you. The moment that sail drops below the horizon, the careful legal line at your threshold quietly dissolves. Inan stalks, Utan stalks, within the doorposts beyond them. All of it is yours now. You direct the haymaking, the fishing, the repairs, the trading of a surplus calf to a neighbor. You settle quarrels between farm hands before they fester into something worse. If a wandering laborer needs hiring, you hire him. If a bad bargain needs refusing, you refuse it. The law and the culture both understand this perfectly well. A wife in her husband's absence acts with his full authority, and no one, not the neighbors, not the workers, not the ambitious cousin down the fjord, finds anything strange in taking orders from the lady of the house. And it is not only management, it is judgment. Suppose a stranger's boat puts in at your landing asking hospitality, friend, traitor, spy, trouble? You decide, and the household lives with your decision. Suppose word comes that a neighbor is moving a boundary stone while the men are away. It's your voice, level and cold in the doorway, that has to make him think better of it. Because everyone knows the men come home in autumn, and everyone knows exactly what you'll tell them. The sagas your descendants write will be full of these women, and the storyteller's respect for them is impossible to miss. Formidable widows running great farms alone, wives whose word bends proud men, matriarchs who settle, or occasionally pointedly start, the disputes that drive whole sagas. The stories exaggerate, as stories do, but stories exaggerate what a culture already believes, and your culture believed this. The strong farm wife is not an exception to the system. She is the system, working as designed. So picture yourself on a midsummer evening, months into his absence. You walk the boundary of the home field in the endless northern light, a dog at your heel, and everything your eye falls on is running because you ran it. The hay drying in long rows, the smoke rising straight from the roof, the cattle fat, the household fed, the peace kept. No skald will ever compose a poem about this. But somewhere across the western sea, your husband tells other men, with real pride, that his farm wants for nothing. Both of you know exactly what that sentence means, and exactly whom it praises. There's a power we haven't named yet, though it's been standing quietly behind every scene tonight. In your world, women famously do not carry weapons or speak at the law assembly, but your culture believes to its bones, and its stories say so on nearly every page, that the most dangerous force in the North is not an axe. It is a woman's word, spoken at the right moment, to the right man, by his own fire. The sagas even have a name for its sharpest form, the wedding. When a family's honor has been injured, a kinsman killed, an insult left standing, and the men hesitate, weighing peace against pride, it is again and again a woman who ends the weighing. A mother lays a cold reminder on the table. A wife asks her husband, with terrible mildness, whether he plans to sit while the neighbors laugh. The word means what it says. She wets him, puts an edge on him, the way a stone puts an edge on steel. Storytellers portray these scenes with awe and a shiver, the quiet sentence by the hearth that sets great and grievous events rolling. Now, honesty? The sagas are literature, written generations later, and scholars will argue forever about how much wedding real firesides heard. But no culture invents so consistent a figure from nothing. At minimum, your world took it utterly for granted that the household's moral ledger, what honor demands, what shame permits, was kept by its women, and that a man who ignored that ledger would be made to feel it where he lived. And the same power runs just as strongly the other way, though it gets fewer famous scenes. For every wedder in the stories, there is a peace weaver, the wife married across a feud precisely to bind it shut, the mother who talks two hot-headed households down from a killing, the widow whose word carries because everyone knows she has no axe to grind and every grudge memorized. Marriage diplomacy, that web of alliances your own wedding was a knot in, is largely administered by senior women, matching daughters to farms with a strategist's eye. When the district holds together through a hard decade, that piece has authors, and most of them wear keys. So add this to your inventory of quiet powers, perhaps above all the others. Within your doorposts, you rule stores and servants and silver, but you also rule something subtler, the story the household tells itself about what it must do. Kings command men's bodies. The woman by the fire, your whole culture agrees, commands something more decisive. She commands their nerve. Now we come to the part of tonight's story that genuinely startles people, so settle deeper into your blankets and let it startle you gently. The legal position of a woman in your world, pagan, seafaring, supposedly savage, is in several ways stronger than that of women in the Christian kingdoms your husband raids. Stronger, in some particulars, than it will be for their descendants 1,000 years on. Begin with the one that historians never stop marveling at: divorce. You can divorce your husband, not petition, not plead, declare. The procedure, as later Icelandic tradition remembers it, is a piece of legal theater. You summon witnesses, and before them you declare yourself divorced at the doorway of the house, and again at the marital bed, the two poles of the marriage, dissolved in public, in daylight, in words. No church to consult, because there is no church, no husband's permission required. And the grounds could be almost startlingly practical: cruelty, desertion, failure to provide. A slap delivered in anger, the sagas suggest, could be answered with a divorce and a demand for compensation. In one famous story, a wife divorces her husband over a shirt he'd taken to a fashion she declared shameful, and out the door she went. The storytellers grin when they tell it, but under the grin sits the fact everyone accepted. The door swung open from her side, too. Now follow the silver, because this is where it gets sharper. Divorce meant the return of your dowry and your mourning gift. Your property came back out of the marriage with you, which changes everything about the balance of a household. A man married to a wealthy woman knows that mistreating her doesn't just risk her kinsman's anger, it risks watching a fortune walk down to the boat landing. Behind many a peaceful longhouse stands that quiet arithmetic. The protections went further. Your kin remained your kin. Marriage didn't erase you into your husband's family, and your brother's obligation to you didn't end at your wedding. You could inherit property. A daughter's share might be smaller than a son's, but it existed, and widows and mothers stood solidly in the line of inheritance. You could own land outright, and the law took insults to you seriously. Offenses against a woman's honor carried real penalties because her honor and her family's were the same fabric. Was it equality? No, and honesty matters on this channel, so let's say it plainly. You cannot speak at the assembly, the thing, where free men make law. Your case needs a male voice to carry it. Your husband's infidelities are judged far more lightly than yours would be. The marriage was arranged around you, however much your consent was courted. This is a hard, hierarchical world, and you stand high within your household, not equal outside it, but measure it against its own time, not ours. Across the sea, churchmen are debating how thoroughly a wife is subject to her husband. Here, a farmer's wife can hold land, keep her own property, command a household economy, and end a bad marriage on her own declared word. The raiders' wives, it turns out, had rights the raided could scarcely imagine. Let that settle in as the fire pops softly, one of history's quietest plot twists. Some parts of your life ask for a softer voice, and this is one of them. So let the fire burn low for a few minutes, and let's speak gently about the bravest thing you will ever do, braver, though no poem will say so, than anything done with a sword. You will bear children, most likely many, across the years of your marriage, and every single time you will do it in a world with no doctors, no medicine worth the name, and no help but the women around you. Childbirth is the battlefield of women in your age. Your culture even reaches for that comparison itself, pairing the courage of the birthing stool with the courage of the shield wall. It is the most dangerous thing that ordinary life will ever ask of you, and ordinary life asks it again and again. When your time comes, the men are sent out, and the longhouse becomes a country of women. Your mother, if she lives, your neighbors, the local woman known for her skill with births, a midwife in everything but title, they gather around you in the firelight. There are practiced hands and warm water and woolen cloths. There are also runes and charms and prayers, calls to Friggs and to Freya and to the Disir, the guardian spirits of your family's women, because in this room, practical skill and sacred help have never been separate things. And here is the sorrow that must be spoken, softly and honestly. Not every mother survives this, and not every child does. Your people know grief the way they know winter, as a season that comes to every house, that must be endured with dignity, and that does eventually yield. The little graves are tended, the lost are named and remembered, and the household closes around the bereaved, like the walls close around the fire, because that is what households are for. But hold, alongside the sorrow, what your world gives you afterward. A safely delivered child is water sprinkled and named, often for a beloved dead grandparent, so that the name and something of the person walks on in the world. Motherhood raises your standing yet again. You are now not only the keeper of the keys, but the maker of the family's future, the living link between its ancestors and its heirs. And around you stands that permanent parliament of women, mothers, aunts, neighbors, wise women, who have carried each other through this since time out of mind. You will rise from the birthing bed, tired, marked, and quietly changed, the way people are changed who have been somewhere hard and come home. And the fire will be built up, and there will be a small new voice in the great hall's chorus at night. Breathe that in and let the shadow pass. Life in your world keeps insisting on itself. When sickness comes to the valley, and it comes every year, riding in with winter visitors or rising with the spring damp, no one sends for a doctor. There are none, not within any distance that matters, not anywhere in your world as later ages will understand the word. What there is instead is you, the medicine chest of the household, its nurse, its pharmacist, and on hard nights, its whole hospital. Your training was your mother's fireside, and hers before that, an inheritance of plant lore accumulated over more generations than anyone can count. You know Angelica for coughs and cold stomachs, so valued that your descendants will protect it by law in their gardens. Yarrow to staunch bleeding, the old name for it in the north, remembers exactly that use. Juniper smoke to cleanse a sick room, willow bark boiled bitter for fevers and aching joints, nettle and dock and plantain for the skin, honey, precious hoarded honey laid into wounds, where it genuinely helps, though you couldn't say why and never need to. Onions, too, have their famous use. The old battle wisdom says feed a strong onion broth to a man wounded in the belly, and if the wound smells of onions after, the gut is pierced and the outlook is dark. Grim knowledge, but knowledge carried by women at a bedside where guessing kills. Healing here is skill and sacredness braided together, like everything else within your doorposts. Alongside the salves go the charms, runes spoken or scratched, prayers to air, the god's own physician, and note well a goddess, herbs gathered with the proper words at the proper moon. Later ages will smile at half of it, and then discover sheepishly that the willow bark held aspirin's ancestor, and the honey fought the wound rot all along. Your medicine is like your weather sense, imperfect, empirical, and much better than nothing, which is the only alternative on offer. Mostly, though, healing is neither herbs nor runes, but labor, the unglamorous around the clock kind. Broth carried, fires kept high, fouled bedding boiled, a fevered child sung to through the worst hours of the night, while the household sleeps and you do not. When the men limp home from a hard season, it's your hands that clean and bind what the sea and the summer did to them, your judgment that says which wounds will mend and which need the valley's one bone setter. And when, despite everything, a bed empties, for your medicine has hard limits and you know them, it is you who washes and wraps and lays out the dead with the honors, and you who steadies the household after. They will not carve healer on your stone. The work was too woven into everything else you were. But count it tonight among the keys you carry. In the long war, every household fights against fever, wound, and winter. You are the standing garrison. The raiders defend the farm a few weeks a year. You defend it every night there's a cough in the dark. The longhouse is never without children, and thank goodness, because a farm this size runs partly on small, quick hands. Your children do not go to school. There are no schools, no letters to learn beyond the runes scratched on wood and stone. Their school is the farm, and the curriculum is everything. The girls shadow you, and their education is your working day, spinning almost as soon as their fingers can manage a spindle. Then the dairy, the brewing, the endless grammar of the loom, the herbs, the stores, and watching you always, how to command a household, how to greet a guest, how to stand in a doorway. By 12 or 13, a daughter of yours is a genuinely skilled worker. By 16, she could run a small farm's indoor economy herself, which is precisely the point, because soon enough she will. The boys drift toward the men's world, the boats, the beasts, the smithy, wrestling and swimming, and ball games rough enough to end in the occasional broken tooth. They learn spear and bow and axe, not as a warrior elite, but the way farm boys learn tools, because every free man is expected to be able to stand in his farm's defense. In winter, everyone, girls too, learns the board game Hnefatafel, the king's table game of raid and escape, and children who cannot yet reach the table stand on the benches to watch the pieces move. But the deepest schooling happens after dark, and much of it comes from you and the old women. The long fires of winter are storytelling fires, the gods and their bargains, Thor among the giants, the family's own dead, who sailed where, who feuded with whom, who said the unforgettable thing 3 generations ago. Your children memorize their genealogy the way later children will memorize multiplication tables, because in your world, knowing precisely who you are and to whom you owe loyalty is not sentiment. It is law, inheritance, and survival. One custom would surprise a modern parent: fostering. Families of standing routinely send a child to be raised for some years in another household, a kinsman's, and allies, sometimes a rival's, because nothing binds two families together like a shared child. It is not abandonment. It is diplomacy conducted in the currency of love, and fosterage bonds often prove as fierce as blood. Still, it is you who packs the small sea chest, and you who stands composed on the shore as a little figure waves from a departing boat, and composure that morning is its own quiet heroism. And through all of it runs your particular, unspoken task, shaping what these children believe a family is. The sagas will remember Norse mothers as the keepers of the family's honor and its memory, the ones who know every debt owed to it and every slight against it. That is you, by the fire, with a child heavy against your shoulder, deciding which stories this house tells about itself. Kings rule for a lifetime. The stories a mother plants rule for centuries. Religion, for you, is not a building you visit. It is the air of the house itself. The gods are not far away in a heaven. They are practically neighbors, present in the doorway, the hearth, the high seat pillars, the boundary stones of the field, the burial mounds of your own ancestors, standing green and quiet within sight of the door. And here is something outsiders rarely understand. The religion of the household is very largely in women's hands. There are no priests here in any organized sense, no scripture, no Sabbath. What there is instead is custom, the right offerings at the right times, and custom lives indoors where you rule. When the first ale of a brewing is poured, a little goes to the house spirits. When the harvest comes in, when a journey begins, when sickness walks the valley, It is most often the husfreyja who makes the small, steady gestures that keep the household square with the unseen. Your closest divine ally is Frigg, wife of Odin, lady of the hearth and of marriage, who knows all fates and speaks few of them, a goddess who would understand your life completely. Close behind her stands Freya, glorious and alarming, goddess of love and gold and magic, who receives half the honored dead into her hall. And nearest of all, so near they feel like family, are the Daesir, the guardian spirits of your bloodline's women, your foremothers watching from just beyond the firelight. Each autumn, at winter's threshold, comes the Disablot, the sacrifice to the Disir, and this feast above all belongs to the women of the house. You lead it. Your daughters watch and learn it. Your mother led it before you, and hers before her. An unbroken chain of firelit autumn evenings, reaching back beyond anyone's counting. And here, at the halfway point of our night together, let me lower my voice and ask you the question this chapter keeps whispering. Every family has its Daesir, whether it uses the word or not, its handed down rituals, its small ceremonies that nobody remembers starting. If you're still drifting rather than dreaming, leave a comment with the tradition your family keeps that's older than anyone can explain, and where in the world it began if you know. And if you're already too sleepy to type, even better, save it for morning. The foremothers are patient. They've waited this long. The year turns on such moments. Midwinter brings Jol, Yule, the great feast in the dark, ale blessed, and oaths sworn and the dead remembered, when the household eats the best of everything, precisely because the world outside is at its worst. Spring and harvest have their offerings, and the mounds of the ancestors receive their visits, because the dead are not gone here. They are the senior members of the family, resting just up the slope, and a household that honors them prospers. Is there fear in this religion? Some. The world beyond the fence line has trolls and hidden folk and the restless dead in it, and winter nights are long. But mostly what your faith gives you is the thing you actually need, the sense that the household is held, that the fire, the family, the fields, and the foremothers are all one woven thing, and that your hands, making the old gestures at the old times, are what keep the weave tight. In this world, holiness looks a great deal like housekeeping, and housekeeping at this latitude has always been a form of holding back the dark. Every few years, word runs ahead of her up the fjord. The vulva is coming, and the entire valley leans toward the news, because the vulva, the staff bearer, the seeress, is the closest thing your world has to a living oracle, and she is, always and only, a woman. Understand what she is, because she has no parallel in the kingdoms to the south. She travels from farm to farm, often with a small retinue, and she is received the way one receives a visiting chieftain, the best seat, the best food, real deference from proud men who defer to almost no one. Her art is called Seder, a transcraft of seeing and shaping fate, of speaking with the spirits about the hidden shape of the coming year. Will the winter be hard? Will the sickness pass? What fate hangs over this child, this voyage, this house? These are the questions people save for her. When she works, it is unforgettable theater and dead serious religion at once. A high platform is built for her. She wears her regalia. Later storytellers will remember one vulva's catskin gloves and glass beaded cloak in loving detail, and she carries the staff that is her office itself. Her very name means staff carrier. The women of the household are gathered to sing the sacred songs that call the spirits in, and there in the firelight before the whole assembly, she travels where no one else can go and comes back with answers. People will repeat what she said for the rest of their lives. And this is not merely legend. 1,000 years on, archaeologists will open certain richly furnished graves, a famous one at Firkat in Denmark, and find women buried with iron staffs, with amulets, with imported finery, with seeds of the henbane plant that can summon visions, buried with honors fit for the highest rank. The seeress was real, her status was real, and her tools went into the earth beside her, like a warrior's sword. Here is the quiet meaning of her for your own life. In your world, the deepest prestige of the sacred runs through women. Even Odin himself, the poems admit with a slight blush, had to learn satyr from the goddess Freya, the highest god apprenticed to a goddess in the very art the vulva practices. Prophecy, fate, the great hidden machinery of the world. When your culture imagines who can see into it, it imagines someone who looks like your grandmother. So when the vulva's boat departs and the valley settles back into its rhythms, something lingers in the longhouse. Your daughters have watched a woman command the awed silence of powerful men, and you return to your loom, where, as it happens, the poets say the Norns themselves, the three great fates, weave the destinies of everyone alive. Weaving women at the loom of fate. Your people chose that image for the operating system of the universe. It did not choose it by accident. Time now to demolish the most cherished myth of all, and you may want to sit up for this one, the filthy Viking, the greasy, matted, mud-caked barbarian of 1,000 films. Prepare to enjoy this, because the truth is not just different, it is opposite, and we have the testimony of the annoyed to prove it. Your people are, by the standards of their age, almost comically well-groomed. Start with the calendar itself. The Norse name for Saturday is Lagerdager, washing day, bath day. Your entire culture sets aside one day in 7 for scrubbing, and the habit is so ingrained that the word will still be sitting there in Scandinavian languages more than 1,000 years later, a fossil of Viking bath night. Once a week, water is heated over the fire, hair is washed and combed out, clothes are changed, nails are trimmed. In a Europe where some holy men regard bathing as a suspicious luxury, this is practically decadent. Then there are the combs. When archaeologists sift Viking Age sites, they find combs everywhere, carved from antler, sturdy, fine-toothed, often carried in their own little cases on the belt. Men and women both carry them the way later ages carry keys and coins. Alongside the combs come tweezers, tiny ear spoons for grooming, wash basins, razors. Your husband, the fearsome raider, owns more personal grooming tools than most modern men, and the finest evidence comes from the complaints of the raided. An English chronicler, writing with a wounded national pride, you can still feel on the page, grumbles that the Danish men settled in England comb their hair daily, bathe every Saturday, change their woolens regularly, and that by these shameless tricks they seduce high-born English ladies. Read that again. The invaders' unfair advantage, per the locals, was that they washed. Meanwhile, an Arab visitor to the north, from a culture with far higher standards of ritual cleanliness, sniffs at the Norse as slovenly. Same people, two mirrors, too clean for the English, not clean enough for Baghdad. History rarely hands you a joke that tidy. For you, the husfreyja, all this is, of course, more work under your command, the heating of wash water, the endless laundry of a wool-clad household, the lye soap, the changes of linen. But it is also pride. Your family walks to the assembly combed, washed, and dressed in cloth whose quality every other woman present can price at a glance. Appearance is honor made visible, and honor is the family business. So tonight, retire the mud caked barbarian with our blessing. Picture instead a Saturday evening by the fjord, steam rising, children shrieking through their hair washing, a big weekly wash strung by the fire, and a raider sitting peaceably by the flames while his wife drags a fine antler comb through his beard. That was the fearsome North. The neighbors never stood a chance. Once a year in high summer, your world holds its parliament, and its fair, its courthouse, its marriage market, and its grandest party, all in the same meadow. The Thing, the great open-air assembly where the free farmers of the district gather to speak law, judge disputes, and be seen. And though the speaking of law belongs to men, make no mistake, the assembly is a festival of households, and you attend in state. The journey itself is half the occasion. The household that can travels together, by boat down the fjord, then overland with pack horses, wearing its best and carrying its finest, because the Thing is where the whole district takes each other's measure for the year. Booths of turf and cloth go up in their traditional family spots. Yours has stood on the same patch of meadow since your husband's grandfather's time. For days, the plain becomes the biggest town you ever see. Hundreds of fires, traders spreading wares, horse fights, and wrestling for the crowds. Old friends from 3 valleys away, news from 20. The formal business hums at the center, cases argued from memory, for the law itself lives in memory, recited aloud by the law speaker in installments, a constitution kept in a man's head. Feuds settled, some more failing to settle, with everyone watching which. Outlawries pronounced. And though your voice cannot be raised in the circle, do not imagine you are outside the game. Your legal interests, your property, your inheritance, your honor, are argued there by your husband or kinsman, and woe to the man who represents a formidable woman badly, and then must ride home with her. The sagas relish those scenes too, the wife receiving the news of a weak settlement, and the temperature dropping around her like nightfall. And so much of the assembly's real work happens outside the circle in precisely the territory you command. Feasting between allied booths, provisioned and presided over by the wives, is where coalitions are actually built before ever a case is called. Marriages are floated, sized up, and half arranged over shared meals, with the senior women conducting the true negotiations behind the formal ones. Reputations are minted in hospitality as much as in law. A district's politics, seen honestly, is a web of households, and you are a weaver by trade. For the young people, of course, the thing is simpler and sweeter. The one time each year when every family in the region stands in the same meadow, combed and washed and dressed to be looked at. More matches begin with a glance across the assembly plain than with any negotiation. You remember? You were 16 at the thing once, pretending to mind your mother's booth, watching a particular young man across the grass pretend not to watch you back. The law got you married. But the meadow, you'd admit by this fire, had a word in first. Autumn. The barley is in, the slaughter month is near, and every day now someone finds a reason to be down by the water, glancing at the mouth of the fjord. And then one afternoon, a child on the headland starts shouting, and the whole farm pours out of doors. And there it is, the striped sail, low on the gray water, coming home. The homecoming is a festival with your fingerprints on every part of it. The homecoming ale, brewed weeks ago on your judgment that this would be the week. The feast, out of your stores. The accounting, too, in a quieter way. It is standing on that shore, counting heads against your memory of the spring, that you learn whether this valley's winter will hold more feasts or more grief. Tonight, let it be a good year. Every oar bench answered for. The hall roars until late, and then the sea chests come up from the ship, and the far world spills out onto your benches in the firelight. Silver, above all, your world's true money, much of it in coins from unimaginable places, dirhams stamped with flowing Arabic script, struck in Samarkand and Baghdad, traded up the Russian rivers hand to hand until they reached a northern deck. Your people judge silver by weight, not by whose face is on it, so arm rings are money you can wear, and when a payment must be made, out come the little folding scales, and a coin is coolly snipped in half. Hack silver, they'll call it, an economy kept in pieces, weighed on scales small enough. Remember this detail. It returns later tonight to fit in a woman's grave goods. But silver is only the beginning. Out of the chests come bolts of silk that began their journey in Byzantium or beyond, glass beakers from the Rhineland, wine, walnuts, wheels of southern salt, a bronze buckle here, a decorated book mount there, pride from who knows what, and destined to be reworked into a brooch for your cloak. Amber and furs went south, the world came north. Archaeologists will one day lift Buddha figurines and Irish reliquaries and thousands upon thousands of Arabic coins out of Scandinavian soil and marvel. This supposedly remote place sat at the end of a bright thread that ran river by river, sea by sea, all the way to Asia. For you, the hall is not trophies, it is position. The silk trim that goes onto your best dress, the beads at your collarbone, the imported cup a guest is served from. Every piece is a sentence in the statement your household makes about itself. And when the celebrating is done, notice where it all ends up, weighed, judged, and locked away in the chests under the benches. His voyage, your keys, the wealth of the wide world, sleeping the winter in a farm wife's strong room, which is to say, under her bed. Now the fire must burn low for a little while, because tonight's honesty has a harder chapter, and this channel doesn't look away from those. It just holds them gently. Not everyone under your roof is free, and not everything in those homecoming ships was silver. They are called thralls, enslaved people, and they are present in some number on most substantial farms in your world, including, we must honestly imagine, yours. Some were born to that status in the north. Some were taken from Ireland, from Britain, from the Baltic and Slavic lands, carried off in the very raids that built the wealth in your chests. It must be said plainly once and without flinching. The taking and trading of human beings was one of the engines of the Viking Age economy, and the wives of raiders lived inside that fact, managed it, and benefited from it. History asks us to see people whole, and this is part of the whole. Within the doorposts, The daily reality of thralls' lives ran through you. They did the heaviest, coarsest work of the farm, the grinding of grain at the hand quern, hour upon hour, the mucking of byres, the hauling of water and wood. The law counted them as property, protected them barely, and recorded their humanity mostly in its silences. The kindest thing that can be said of many households, perhaps yours, is that people who share one roof, one fire, and one hard winter after another cannot help becoming people to each other. The sagas here and there show real bonds, real trust, even real love across that terrible line. But kindness within an unfree system is a mercy, not a defense of it, and we won't pretend otherwise. What can be said, softly and truthfully, is that the door out of thraldom stood open in ways that would surprise you. Manumission was common and Haid honored rituals. A thrall could be freed at the assembly, at a feast, before witnesses. Thralls could sometimes earn and keep small money of their own and buy their freedom with it. The freed took a recognized place in society, and their children stood higher, and their grandchildren higher still, the stain fading by generations. Some enslaved women, concubines to powerful men, saw their sons acknowledged, freed, even become leaders. One king of Norway in these very years was the son of a captured Irish princess, and the sagas name her Melkorka's sisters in fate with something close to reverence, and time itself was slowly on the side of the enslaved. Within a few centuries, pushed by new faith, new law, and a changing economy, thraldom in the north withered and was formally ended, remembered afterward with discomfort. That does not restore what was taken from the people who ground grain in the dark end of your hall. But their descendants walked free in these same valleys, indistinguishable in time from anyone else's, woven permanently into the ancestry of the North. Hold them in your mind for a moment by the low fire, with the respect the old records mostly failed to give them. They were there, they were people, and they endured. Sooner or later, every conversation about Viking women arrives at the same door, the shield maiden. The woman with the sword and the shield wall stare. So let's open that door properly, with honesty on both hinges, because the real answer is stranger and better than either a simple yes or a simple no. Start with what your own culture says about itself. The stories are full of armed women, Valkyries choosing the slain, saga heroines who take up weapons, the legendary Lagertha, whom a later Danish historian describes fighting with matchless courage. Your mythology, remember, gives half the honored dead not to a god, but to a goddess. Whatever your people's daily reality, their imagination made room, lots of room, for the woman with a spear. Then came a September morning in 1878 in the Swedish trading town of Birka, when excavators opened one of the richest warrior graves ever found there. A sword, an axes, spears, armor-piercing arrows, 2 shields, 2 war horses, even a set of gaming pieces for planning strategy, the full professional kit, a commander's burial. For well over a century, everyone assumed a great male warrior. Then, first through bone study, and finally in 2017 through DNA, came the finding that made headlines around the world. The warrior of grave BJ581 was a woman. What does that prove? Here is where this channel owes you its honesty, because scholars themselves are still arguing by their own firesides. Some say, a woman buried by her community with a war leader's full honors is a woman her community saw as a war leader. Believe the grave. Others counsel care. Grave goods are messages, not diaries. Objects can signal family, status, or symbolism, and one extraordinary burial does not populate the shield walls with women. Both camps are serious. Both may be partly right. The honest summary is this: armed women were real enough to bury and real enough to believe in, and they were rare, the extraordinary exception in a world where the overwhelming rule was the woman we've spent tonight with, the one whose weapon was a household. And oh, what the exceptions could look like. Far from your fjord, in the year 971, Byzantine soldiers fighting the Rus, Norse descended warriors on the Danube, will report their astonishment at finding among the enemy dead after a ferocious battle the bodies of women in war gear. That account comes from the enemy's own chroniclers, who had no romance to sell. It seems that sometimes, at the far edges of the Norse world, the shield maidens stepped out of the poems. But when your culture wanted to honor the courage of women, its everyday women, it didn't reach for the sword. It reached for the image we've already met, the poets pairing the birthing bed with the battlefield, the loom of the Norns weaving fate itself. Your world knew where its women's battles were actually fought. It just also left the armory door, ever so slightly, ajar. One question has been waiting patiently all night, and the deep hours are the right time for it. Your marriage was arranged, negotiated over ale, priced in silver and land, sealed for the alliance of two families. So, in all of this, was there love? And the answer of your world, given in its stories, its poems, and its stones, is quietly emphatic. Yes, sometimes before the wedding, often after it, and this is the part that catches people, your culture considered married love worth celebrating, worth boasting of, and worth grieving loudly when it was lost. Listen to the evidence because it's lovely. The poetry of the North, composed by warriors, remember, in a culture that prized the unmoved face, keeps breaking into tenderness. Verses praising a wife's wisdom before her beauty. The god Freyr, in one beloved poem, made lovesick and useless the divine ideal of manhood, undone by longing, and the poets clearly delighted in it. Even Odin, who knows everything, says in the old wisdom verses that no sickness is worse for a wise man than to have nothing left to love. Listen to the sagas, which are among everything else some of history's great marriage literature. Couples who scheme together like partners in a firm. Husbands who consult their wives before chieftains, because the storyteller wants you to know this man is wise. The recurring, unmistakable figure of the marriage that grows, begun as an arrangement between strangers and annealed through shared winters and shared rule of a farm into the fiercest loyalty in the story. Your culture did not expect you to marry for love. It rather expected, given decent luck and decent people, that you would come to it the way a banked fire tended daily is warmer by midwinter than any quick blaze. And when it took root, your world let it show. Husbands and wives exchanged gifts at festivals with real ceremony. Endearments survive in the old language. My heart's delight is there among them, tender as anything whispered since. And at the end, the stones speak one last time. Among all those rune stones, there are husbands' words for wives, and wives for husbands that still ache after 1,000 years. The farmer who called his wife the best in the land, the widow who wrote that no better lord of a household would come again. People do not carve grief in granite for an alliance. They carve it for a person. None of this cancels the honest ledger of your marriage, the arrangement, the inequalities, the law's uneven eye. Both things are true at once, or they usually are. But as the fire burns down tonight, let this truth be the warmer one. In the longhouse's darkness, behind the woolen bed curtains, after the day's command and the evening's stories, you and the man the families chose for you lie talking low about the hay and the children and the neighbors, two rulers of a small kingdom, holding their nightly council closer than either of them was ever required to be. The negotiators at your father's table all those years ago were pricing land and loyalty. They had no idea, bless them, what they were actually arranging. We have kept this chapter for deep in the night because it needs the quietest hour. Every spring, you stand on the shore and watch the sail go out. And some autumn, on some farm, in some year, perhaps one of yours, the season turns, the slaughter month comes, the first snow dusts the mountain, and the fjord stays empty. There is no letter, there is no messenger service, no casualty list, no knock at the door. There is only time and the terrible arithmetic of the sailing season closing. News, if it comes at all, comes the slow way. A ship from another valley putting in with word passed mouth to mouth across the whole North Sea, a storm off the Orkneys, a battle on an Irish river, a crew that wintered over and may yet appear next summer. For months, sometimes years, a wife can live in the gray country between wife and widow, running the farm all the while, because the cows do not pause for grief. When certainty finally comes, your world does not ask you to collapse, and it does not really permit it. Composure, again, grief carried upright, but it gives you something else instead, something sturdier than sympathy, standing. A widow in your society is, legally, the most independent a woman can be. No father's authority, no husband's. She controls her own property, dowry, morning gift, and her share of the estate. She can manage the farm in her own name, arrange her children's futures, and crucially, she cannot be simply handed off again. A widow's consent to remarriage is hers to give or withhold more firmly than any maiden's. Many widows do remarry, often quite practically. Some, especially those with land and grown sons, look around at their acres and their authority and decide with perfect satisfaction that they are done with husbands. The sagas will remember these women vividly, the formidable widows who anchor whole districts, marry off daughters like a chess master deploying queens, and pursue their husband's unfinished business with a patience that frightens hardened men. Behind the saga drama stands the plain social fact. The death of a raider did not dissolve his household, it promoted his wife. But standing is for daylight, nights are longer. There will be an evening, some weeks after the news, when the household sleeps, and you sit alone by the banked fire in the seat that was his, with the dogs' heads heavy on your feet, and let yourself walk back through it. The negotiation you eavesdropped on at 16, the hammer laid in your lap, the mornings on the shore, the particular way he came up from the boat landing shouting for his children. The fire settles, the wind moves in the smoke hole, and then you do what the women of this coast have always done. You bank the coals so the fire will live until morning. You check the bar on the door, and you go to your rest, because tomorrow the farm will look to you, and you intend, as ever, to be worth looking to. There is one way in your world to make a person last, One technology of memory sturdier than any saga, because sagas need tellers, and this needs only weather worse than granite, which does not exist, the runestone. And here is tonight's next quiet surprise. An astonishing share of these monuments were raised by women, for women, or both. Picture how it happens: a death in a landowning family, a husband lost abroad, a mother gone after a long life, and the survivors commission a stone, a boulder, or a shaped slab cut with a ribbon of runes, painted in bold colors that the centuries will wear away, and set up where everyone passes, by the road, at the bridge, on the boundary. The formula is simple and endlessly moving. And this person raised this stone in memory of that person who was this to them. It is a gravestone, a legal notice of inheritance, and a billboard of family honor, all in one. Now listen to who is speaking on these stones. Widows raise them for husbands who died east with the great expeditions or west in England, and in doing so, publicly document themselves as the heads of their households and heirs of the estate. Mothers raise them for sons, daughters for fathers, and men raise them for women in words that let us hear, faintly but truly, what a Husfreya's life added up to in her neighbor's eyes. On a stone in Swedish Västmanland, a farmer named Holmgaut had carved for his wife Odindisa a verse that historians will still be quoting 1,000 years later. There will come to Hasmura no better housewife who holds sway over the farm. Read that closely. Hold sway. Her husband chose, as her eternal epitaph, a ruler's verb. Some stones go further still. In Norway, by an old road at Dinna, a mother named Gunvor raised a stone for her daughter Astrid. The handiest maiden in Hadeland, the runes say, and built a bridge in her memory besides, and the carving is so fine that the stone itself proclaims the family's wealth. Two women's names, cut in stone by a woman's commission, still standing when everything else of their world has melted into the fields. And on stone after stone, women appear as bridge builders, commissioning real bridges and causeways as memorials, public works signed by widows and mothers, the Viking Age equivalent of a library with your name over the door. For someone in your position, the meaning is plain and rather wonderful. Your world's most permanent medium, the one message your people knew how to send to us across the whole distance of time, was open to you, not to speak of you only, but for you to speak, to buy the stone, choose the words, and stand your family's memory up at the roadside like a flag. Most of what you do, we've said tonight, leaves no record. But when your people did make records, the farm wife is right there in the granite, named, praised, and holding sway. And now the year folds down into its long, dark, strangely tender season, the one every stereotype forgets and every northern soul secretly loves: winter. From the autumn slaughter to the spring sowing, the outdoor world shrinks to a few blue hours of daylight. The fjord goes black and still, the snow seals the passes, and life pulls indoors to the fire like a tide coming home. Here is winter's secret. It is the social season. No one is raiding, no one is trading. The hay is in, the stores are locked, and for once, the whole scattered neighborhood has time. So the dark months fill with visiting, households trudging or skiing or sledging to one another's halls for feasts that can last days, because hospitality laws and simple sanity both demand it. Your hall on a feast night is everything your year of work was for: the long fire roaring, the benches packed, The ale you brewed going around in the good horns, the smell of meat you smoked in October, light and noise and steam, defying the enormous silence outside. Indoors, the evenings have their liturgy. The textile work hums along the women's benches. There is never an evening without spindles. The Hnefatafel boards come out, and grown men frown over them like kings at war. There are riddles and wrestling and the memory games of genealogy. And above all, there are the stories, the gods, the ancestors, the voyages, told by the best voices in the valley, while the fire paints everyone's faces amber. Your children will carry these winter nights inside them forever. Whole sagas will survive to reach us precisely because there were 10,000 winters like this one, with nothing to do but remember beautifully. At the heart of the season stands Geol, Yule, the midwinter feast your descendants will pour into Christmas without ever quite losing the old shape of it. The best ale, brewed by you and blessed before it's drunk. Oaths sworn on the sacred cup for the year to come. The dead honored because at midwinter the veil between the living family and the ancestral one is thin, and the Disir ride close. Games, gifts, gluttony, firelight. It is defiance, really. The household at its warmest set deliberately against the year at its coldest, and no one throws that particular party better than the lady with the keys. There are hard notes, of course. There always are. Stores must stretch, and February will test your autumn arithmetic. Sickness travels with visitors. The dark can press on people's spirits, and everyone knows someone whom winter makes strange. But your people's whole art of living is compressed into this season. The discipline of stores, the architecture of warmth, the treasury of stories, the stubborn festivity. Southern peoples fear the northern winter. You were built for it, and honestly, wrapped in wool by a fire that never dies, with the snow hissing softly on the roof turf and a story unwinding in the dark, there are worse places in history to be sleepy. You'd know. You're there now. All night we've kept you on the shore, watching the ships leave. But that is not the whole truth of Norse women and the sea, and the exceptions are glorious. Because in these very decades, your people are doing something history will remember even longer than the raids. They are emigrating across open ocean to lands at the edge of the known world. And you cannot found a country with a boatload of men. The women sailed. The great magnet in your lifetime is Iceland, discovered, the traditions say, in your parents' generation and filling fast. Whole households go, the farmer and his wife, children, workers, thralls, cattle bellowing in the hold, the high seat pillars of the old house lashed amidships and packed in the chests, everything a farm's indoor economy needs. Looms and spindles, seed and salt, the fire-making steel. For the wife aboard, the crossing is days or weeks of cold, wet, seasick misery with everything she owns and everyone she loves in one open hull on the North Atlantic. And at the end of it, a green, empty, treeless country of volcanoes and hot springs, where every single thing a household is must be built from the turf up. The settlement of Iceland is, among other things, one of history's great feats of housewifery. 10,000 kitchens, dairies, and looms conjured out of a wilderness in a single lifetime. And the traditions of that settlement remember something remarkable. Some of the founders were women, not wives of founders. Founders. The most famous your descendants will tell of is Aud the Deep-Minded, and her story deserves telling by any fire. daughter of a chieftain, widow of a king in Dublin, she loses husband and then son to war in the British Isles, and does not fold. She has a ship built in secret in the forest, gathers her grandchildren, her kin, her followers, and commands her own vessel across the sea to Iceland, where she claims a swath of land the size of a small kingdom, hands out farms to her crew and to freed slaves, arranges her granddaughters' marriages like a stateswoman, and dies at a great feast, upright and in command to the last. The settlement records set her among the four greatest colonists of the whole land taking. Her nickname says everything your culture wished to say. Not Odd the beautiful, not Odd the devout, Odd the deep minded. They remembered her for her judgment. Nor does the story stop at Iceland. Within a few generations, your descendants push on to Greenland, and from Greenland, briefly, astonishingly, to the coast of North America itself. And in those far western traditions, too, the women are right there in the boats. Gudrid Thorbjorn's daughter, called the Far Traveler, who crosses the ocean, bears a son on the American shore, the first European child born there, the stories claim, and ends her long life having seen more of the planet than almost any human being of her millennium, man or woman. So, yes, mostly the wife keeps the shore and rules it. But when the horizon truly opened, your people never doubted that women belonged on the far side of it. The deep minded, it turns out, make excellent navigators. One more journey before the fire burns low, not west with the settlers this time, but out into the web. Because your fjord, remote as it feels tonight, is a thread in a network that would astonish you if you could see it drawn whole. A lattice of sea roads and river roads binding your world to nearly every other one. Its knots are the trading towns, and they are the most cosmopolitan places the North has ever produced. Hedeby, at the neck of Denmark, where an Arab traveler will wander the muddy streets, taking notes. Birka, on its island in a Swedish lake, fur capital of the Baltic. Kaupang, down the coast from your own fjord. In their lanes now you can hear Norse, Frisian, Slavic, Saxon. You can watch silver from Central Asia, wait out for furs from the Arctic, walrus ivory, amber, honey, soapstone, quernstones, wine, silk, glass. These towns are where your world plugs into everyone else's. And here is the detail this channel has been saving for you. The graves of these towns are full of women, and not only wives of merchants. Women buried with the tools of trade itself, the little folding balance scales, the sets of standardized weights, the touchstones for testing silver, grave after grave at Birka and beyond. Scales in a grave mean what a sword means in a grave. This was the work of the person's life, said by the people who knew her best. Some scholars will argue over how many of these women traded in their own right versus alongside husbands. The honest answer is both existed, but the picture is irresistible either way. A Norse woman at a market stall, weighing hack silver with quick fingers, arguing a price in two languages, keys at her belt even here. It fits once you think about it. Who in this whole society is trained from girlhood in valuing goods, managing stores, judging quality at a glance, and driving a bargain? Who manufactures the cloth that is itself a currency? The husfreya's skill set is a merchant's skill set. Small wonder that when Norse households settle abroad, in the Danelaw towns of England, in Dublin, along the Russian rivers, the women arrive not as passengers, but is half the firm. There's one more thread to follow east, and it glitters. Along the great rivers toward Byzantium and the Caliphate, Norse descended traders, the Rus, grow rich, and an Arab envoy who meets them on the Volga writes down, amazed, what their wealth looks like. It is worn by the women. For every 10,000 silver coins a man amasses, the visitor reports, his wife receives a neck ring. Some women wear many, riches stacked gleaming at their throats, like a bank statement made of metal. However far from your quiet fjord that scene lies, the grammar of it is pure home, the wealth of the venture displayed and banked upon the wife. From the Volga to your own bench by the fire, the whole sprawling Norse world agrees on where the treasure belongs. It belongs with her. If you want to know, once and for all, how high a woman could stand in your world, don't ask the sagas, ask the earth. Because the single most magnificent Viking burial ever found, the richest, the most beautiful, the one whose treasures will fill a museum and define the very look of the Viking Age for the modern world, was made for two women. It happened just up the coast from your fjord and just before your time. In the year 834, at a place later called Oseberg, a community took an entire ocean-going ship, 70 feet of carved oak, its prow spiraling into a serpent's head, a vessel fit for a king's voyages, and hauled it ashore. Onto its deck, they built a burial chamber hung with tapestries. Into it, they laid two women, one elderly, one younger, and around them they heaped a send-off beyond anything archaeology will ever find for any Viking man. 4 ornately carved sleighs and a ceremonial wagon, the only complete one the age will leave us. 5 carved beds, tents, chests, looms, and the whole apparatus of grand textile work, imported silks, tapestries showing processions of figures, kitchen gear down to the apples in a bucket, and animals for the journey in numbers that speak of stupendous wealth. Then they buried ship and all beneath a mound and left it to the centuries. When the mound is opened in 1904, it will stun the worlds and then quietly embarrass it. Scholars, gazing at the grandest Viking grave imaginable, will spend years assuming there simply must be a great man in it somewhere, or that the burial must really honor some absent king. The bones say otherwise, patiently for decades. 2 women, a ship for the ages, and it was hers or theirs. Who were they? The honest answer is that no one knows, and the mystery is half the beauty. A queen and her companion, a great chieftain's widow, some whisper the grandmother of Norway's first king, or look again at that wagon, those tapestries of solemn processions, the finest of the grave goods, a priestess of the highest rank, a mistress of the very rites we watched the vulva perform, buried with the sacred vehicles of her office? The elderly woman's body will tell later scientists a very human story. She was around 80, bent with arthritis and ailments, a woman who had been powerful long enough to grow old in it. Around her, everything from the silks on the walls to the humblest kitchen ladle says the same thing in one voice. Whoever she was, an entire region owed her a ship. And notice, after everything we've seen tonight, what her people packed for her eternity. Not weapons, looms, tapestries, sleighs and wagons for splendid travel, the tools of cloth, ceremony, and command, the empire of the indoors, gilded and carved and made fit for a goddess's household. When your world wanted to bury its very greatest, It buried a Husfreyja and gave her the finest ship it had. The keys, in the end, outranked the sword in the only vote that counts, what a people chooses to send into forever. The years turn like the year does, and somewhere in their turning, you become the old woman of the longhouse. And here your world has one last gift for you, because in the north, an old woman is not diminished. She is distilled. Your daughters rule their own halls now. You fostered wisdom into them the way your mother fostered it into you. Your sons' wives carry the keys of this house. You handed them over yourself, in your own time and on your own terms, the way a captain hands over a ship. What remains to you is the thing your whole life has been compounding: authority without portfolio. You know every bloodline in 3 valleys, every boundary stone's history, every debt and grudge and marriage that shapes the local map of power. When disputes flare, both sides find reasons to visit your fireside. When the vulva is too far to send for, it's your dreams the household asks about in the morning. The younger women time their brewing by your say-so. The children believe correctly that you know everything. Your days grow slower and rounder. You spin still. Hands like yours never stop. The spindle is nearly a heartbeat by now, but you sit nearer the fire's center in the warm seat with the best furs, and the household arranges itself around your comfort with an attentiveness that is your culture's plainest tribute. Honoring the old is not sentiment here, it is theology. The ancestors, remember, are the senior family. You are simply becoming one of them slowly, in full view, and everyone adjusts their reverence accordingly. And you become the library. On winter nights, it is you they turn to now for the deep versions of the stories, the genealogies entire, the voyages with every name intact, the exact words your grandmother used about the hard year, the way the wedding hammer felt in your lap 60 years ago. Every old woman by every fire in this world is a manuscript. The sagas that survive to reach us will have passed, generation upon generation, through memories exactly like yours. When you tell the children about the morning the ships left, you are not reminiscing. You are publishing. There will be a last winter, of course. You know it as calmly as you know the calendar. You've made your arrangements with your usual competence, the property spoken for before witnesses, the words chosen for whichever stone or mound will hold your name, the good linen set aside. Your people do not meet death as a stranger. You fed it, feasted it at Yule, tended its mounds all your life. When it comes for you, it will find the stores full, the fire banked, the keys handed on, and the household, your life's true monument, running so smoothly that it will take death itself a moment to notice anything has changed. But not tonight. Tonight you are simply old and warm and immensely comfortable, wrapped in wool by the long fire, with a great-grandchild asleep against your side, listening to the wind take its familiar path through the smoke hole. 80 years of winters, and the fire has never once gone out on your watch. Let your eyes close on that. Come back now, slowly, along the whole length of this night. Drift up the fjord one last time in the blue northern dusk, past the boathouse and the drying racks, up the path between the home field walls, to the long house with its green roof and its ribbon of wood smoke standing straight in the still air. The door is barred now. Inside, the long fire has been banked down to a deep orange murmur, and the hall is full of sleep. The household along the benches under wool and fur, a dog twitching in a dream of summer, the cattle breathing their slow warmth at the far end, the loom standing patient in the shadows, with tomorrow's work hanging in its threads. And on the bench by the fire's heart, the lady of the house, keys set carefully beside her, where her hand would find them in the dark. Let the pictures of the night file past once more, unhurried, like guests taking their leave. The negotiation overheard at 16, and the hammer laid in a bride's lap. Iron keys, warm from being worn, the white arithmetic of the dairy, and the drop spindle turning at 10 patient hours for every hour of cloth. A sail 2 years in the weaving, cracking full of wind at the fjord's mouth. A summer of command in the endless light. Words spoken at a doorway that could end a marriage. Words carved on a stone that made one last forever. No better housewife who held sway. The vulva on her high platform, and the songs the women sang. Saturday, steam and antler combs. Silver from Baghdad sleeping in a chest beneath a bed. A ship under a mound with 2 women aboard, and apples packed for the voyage. And through all of it, one figure standing at the still center of that turning world, a woman in a doorway at dusk, counting her cattle home, holding in her ring of iron keys the fields, the fire, the family, and the winter itself at bay. History, as we say on this channel, mostly remembered the ships. But you know the truth now, and it can keep you company in the dark. The ships always came home to her. Everything, in the end, came home to her. The fire settles. The wind hums once in the smoke hole and moves on down the fjord. Somewhere up the slope, the old mounds keep their watch, and the stars wheel slowly over the mountain, and nothing in the great sleeping house needs anything from you at all. You can put the day down now. The stores are full, the door is barred, the fire is banked and will live until morning. It always does, on her watch, and tonight on yours. Breathe out, long and slow, like the tide leaving the fjord. Let your thoughts unravel like wool from the spindle. Sleep is coming up the path from the water now, soft-footed and familiar, and the door of this house has always been open to a gentle guest. Thank you for spending this night in the northern longhouse, 1100 years upwind of everything you know. If this journey helped you drift, the subscribe button is just a quiet click away, and it genuinely helps this small channel keep the fire lit. And if your family carries an old story of its own, a crossing, a farm, a formidable grandmother with keys of her own, leave it in the comments, along with where in the world it happened. Those threads deserve weaving into something that lasts. May your stores be full, your door be barred, and your fire live gently until morning. Rest easy, sleep well. This is Drowsy History.